The baby was not sick. Marcus had known it for 11 days before he said anything. 11 days of watching, of checking, of comparing what he saw in that nursery against everything he knew from 6 years of caring for children in houses like this one. 11 days of telling himself he was wrong. He was not wrong. Nathan Reid was signing papers at his desk when Marcus appeared in the doorway. He was not the kind of man who interrupted. In 8 months of working in this house, Marcus had learned exactly where the boundaries were, and he had never crossed a single one. So, when Nathan looked up and saw Marcus standing at the study door at 7 in the morning, with his hands at his sides and his face carrying something that was not his usual expression, he set his pen down. What Marcus said next stopped the room completely. "The baby is not sick, sir. He is being poisoned." Nathan did not speak for 3 seconds. Then he stood up slowly, the way powerful men stand when they are deciding between dismissal and attention and have not yet chosen. He looked at Marcus the way employers look at staff who have just crossed a line, carefully and with the particular coldness of a man who built his entire life on information being delivered through proper channels. He told Marcus that was an extremely serious thing to say. Marcus did not apologize. He reached into the front pocket of his jacket and placed something on the desk between them, a small, clear medicine dropper, unmarked, the kind that comes with no label and no packaging and no reason to exist in a nursery that already has a fully documented prescription schedule approved by 3 separate pediatricians. Nathan looked at the dropper. He had never seen it before. Marcus told him he found it behind the back panel of the lower nursery cabinet, pushed deep into the corner behind a stack of folded blankets. Hidden the way something is hidden when the person hiding it is careful but not careful enough. He had found it 6 days ago. He had spent those 6 days watching to see if anyone came back for it. Someone had. At 2 in the morning, on the 4th night, Marcus had been sitting in the chair beside the nursery door, the way he always sat on nights when the baby was restless. The house was completely dark. The hallway was silent. And the nursery door had opened by 4 inches, and a hand had reached inside and placed 2 drops of something from an identical dropper onto the baby's pacifier before withdrawing and closing the door again. Marcus had seen the hand clearly. He had seen the ring on the 4th finger, the same ring worn every day by the only person in this house who had unrestricted access to every room at every hour without explanation. Nathan picked up the dropper from the desk. His hands were completely steady. That was the thing Marcus noticed. A man who had just been told his infant son was being deliberately poisoned, and his hands did not shake even once. Because Nathan Reid had already begun to understand who the ring belonged, Nathan had hired Dr. Elliot Shaw 17 years ago. He had hired him the same way he hired everyone who worked close to him, through 3 rounds of verification, 2 background checks, and a personal recommendation from someone whose judgment he trusted completely. Shaw had been the family physician for over a decade. He had treated Nathan through a shoulder surgery, a bout of pneumonia, and the anxiety that followed the first year of building the company from nothing. He had been in this house more times than Nathan could count. He had visited the nursery 11 times in the 3 weeks since the baby started getting worse. Marcus had written it down. Every visit, every time. He pulled a small folded piece of paper from his jacket pocket and placed it beside the dropper on Nathan's desk. A handwritten log in precise, careful columns. The date, the time of Dr. Shaw's arrival, the time he spent in the nursery alone before Nathan or anyone else entered. And in the final column, the time the baby's symptoms worsened each evening. The pattern was exact. Every single worsening episode occurred within 4 hours of one of Shaw's visits. Not sometimes, not mostly. Every time, without a single exception across 11 documented entries, the baby who had been stable that morning would by evening be running a fever that the nurses charted as unexplained viral progression. Nathan sat back down slowly. He looked at the log, and then at the dropper, and then at nothing at all for a moment. The study was completely silent. Outside the window, the early morning light was coming up over the garden, and somewhere in the house above them, the baby was asleep in the nursery, stable for now, because Shaw had not visited yesterday. Marcus told him there was something else. He had looked up the compound. He had taken a photograph of the dropper with his phone on the 2nd night after finding it and sent the image to a pharmacist he knew from a previous household, a man who had spent 30 years in compounded medications. The pharmacist had identified the dropper type as consistent with a specific category of compounded sedative suppressant. The kind that administered in microdoses over several weeks produces symptoms indistinguishable from a rare pediatric autoimmune condition. kind of condition that would eventually require a very specific and very expensive treatment protocol, the kind that only one physician in the city was currently licensed to administer. Nathan looked up from the desk. Marcus said the name quietly, the way a person says a name when they already know the listener has arrived at the same destination by a different road. Dr. Elliot Shaw. Nathan stood up from his chair and walked to the window. He stood there looking at the garden for a long time without speaking. Marcus waited. He had learned in 8 months that this was what Nathan Reid did when he was not processing information, but deciding what to do with information he had already fully processed. When Nathan finally turned back from the window, his face was completely calm. That was the moment Marcus understood this was not going to end quietly, and that whoever had given Shaw the instruction had made the last mistake they would ever make in this house. Nathan called Dr. Shaw at 7:43 in the morning and asked him to come to the house. He did not explain why. He used the same tone he used for every other call. Calm, direct, no indication that anything was different from any of the previous 11 visits. Shaw said he would be there within the hour. Nathan thanked him and ended the call and stood in his study for a moment, looking at the dropper and the log still on his desk. Then he made a second call, this one to his head of legal. Shaw arrived at 8:51. He came through the front door with his leather medical bag and his usual expression of professional warmth, and asked how the little one was doing. Nathan told him the baby had been unsettled through the night and led him toward the study rather than the nursery. Shaw followed without hesitation because a man who believes his arrangement is undiscovered has no reason to hesitate. Nathan closed the study door. He placed the unmarked dropper on the desk between them without speaking. Shaw looked at it for exactly 2 seconds before his expression changed. Not dramatically, not the collapse of a guilty man caught completely off guard. Something quieter and more precise than that. The specific adjustment of a man who is prepared for several possible scenarios and has just identified which one he is now inside. He said it was not what Nathan thought it was. Nathan placed Marcus's log beside the dropper. 11 entries, 11 visits, 11 matching deterioration windows. Shaw looked at the log and said nothing. The room was completely silent except for the sound of the morning birds outside the study window, and somewhere above them, the faint sound of the baby waking in the nursery. Nathan asked him one question. "Who told you to do it?" Shaw was silent for 15 seconds. Nathan counted them. Then Shaw reached into his jacket pocket and placed a folded envelope on the desk. Inside was a single page, a wire transfer confirmation, a date 3 months ago, and the name of the account from which the payment originated. The account belonged to Nathan's younger brother, Colin who had contested their father's estate for 4 years, Colin who had lost the arbitration and signed the settlement and shaken Nathan's hand and said it was finished. Colin who had been at the baby's naming ceremony 8 months ago, holding the child and smiling with the particular warmth of a man who had accepted what he could not change. Colin who stood to inherit everything if Nathan's only direct heir did not survive infancy. 2 men from Nathan's legal team were already waiting in the hallway when Nathan opened the study door. Shaw did not resist. He picked up his medical bag out of habit and then set it back down when he understood he would not need it and walked out between the 2 men without looking back. Nathan stood alone in the study for a long moment. Then he walked upstairs to the nursery and stood at the crib and looked at his son sleeping in the morning light, breathing steadily, the color returning to his small face now that 11 days of microdoses had stopped. Marcus was sitting in the chair beside the nursery door, exactly where he always sat. Nathan looked at him for a long time. Then he asked him why he had waited 11 days before saying anything. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then he said something in the steady, quiet voice of a man who has thought carefully about every word before he speaks any of them. "I needed to be certain, sir, because the people who benefit most from your blindness are never the ones standing in the light."